I'd like to turn it over, Morgan, to you just to get started and give a little bit of background about what you guys are working on and what the problem is that we're seeing in the industry and so forth.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. We really appreciate the opportunity to be on here and appreciate all your listeners for joining in. So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Morgan Tweet, and I'm Chief Operating Officer of I&D Hemp. We're an industrial hemp processor for grain and fiber. We're located here in Montana, and we've been really blessed to have the opportunity to work with farmers the last 4 years and under contract and production. And I've really seen firsthand, kind of the stifling regulations, the impact that has on our growers, and just kind of the slow growth we've seen as an industry because of that. So I reached out to Courtney and Erica last year, really saw this opportunity with the upcoming Farm Bill and wanted to really make a motion or a move to try and get some distinction between grain and fiber hemp and floral cannabinoid production, just so that we can open up the market a little bit more and make it easier for producers who really take the burden of the regulations right now to try and open that for them. And so this campaign we're going to talk to you guys about today is started with that idea of, first, let's try to create a designation between the two production models to educate, politicians and advocates and consumers alike about the differences in production and the products that we're making. And then also let's tie in how we can change regulation and how the actual implementation of the policy and how we manage cannabis production in the US through this bill. So, for those of you that don't necessarily work with farmers, under current USDA law, we are required to sample every field for compliance. And as we all know, the compliant compound THC is only found in the floral material. And so to us as grain and fiber producers and manufacturers, we're not even harvesting the material that is potentially in compliance. And so what we really went back to is if we could remove THC out of the conversation and we just look at grain and fiber as a true row crop and commodity, what would that look like for the licensing procedure? What would that look like for production model? And ultimately, what does that look like for breeding and other seeds and genetics that we need to do? So if we're going to compete on the global market and with other commodities, we need to give our farmers the absolute, widest opportunity to find genetics that really yield well and, work for their region. And it feels like this THC conversation is really the ceiling for what we're seeing out there. So Courtney's going to go into more about what the actual policy looks like. Erica's going to talk to you guys about what our strategy is, how you can help, and open to conversation because, we're trying to speak for a lot of people and we know that we haven't seen everything. So hopefully you guys can engage with us and help move this forward.
Courtney?
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today or whatever day that you're watching this. We're really excited to share this with you. So thank you so much, Mandy, for having us on today and just for the overall support from Global Hemp Association. We really appreciate it. So as Morgan laid the base foundation, what we're working on is an exemption for grain and fiber from the existing federal regulatory framework as is currently set. And now what we are seeking to accomplish is to really place industrial hemp, grain, and fiber is close to traditional row crops as we can, given the fact that we're still under, a federal marijuana prohibition state and given the concerns that exist from law enforcement regarding non-compliant high THC production. And so while ideally we could just take grain and fiber completely out of the regulatory framework, there does still need to be some framework put in place. But so what we're trying to accomplish is to give grain and fiber farmers a little bit of additional incentive for their production and to have less hurdles that they have to go through to actually grow their crops. A lot of economists over the last year plus have been saying that if our industry is going to scale, it's really going to be through grain and fiber production. And we want to ensure that our federal government is really encouraging that and ensuring that the regulations and policies that we put in place are fostering the ability for farmers to do so. And so that's what the grain and fiber hemp exemption is all about. And so a little history is that grain and fiber products and the harvested material of grain and fiber from the cannabis plant has actually always been exempt from the definition of marijuana as early as the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act carried through into the marijuana definition, the Controlled Substances Act. But the issue has always been the actual cultivation of the plants under federal law. And under the 2014 Farm Bill, we were given our pilot program authority. That definition for industrial hemp was all encompassing anything below the 0.3%. And as we moved from the pilot programs in the 2014 Farm Bill to full commercial legalization with the 2018 Farm Bill, a lot of emphasis was put on protecting cannabinoid production, which has been really the predominant driving market force for the growth of our industry, which has been absolutely fantastic. But at the same time, it's created some additional restrictions for grain and fiber farmers that really don't need to be in place, because the risks of, quote unquote, risk of THC just isn't there with grain and fiber crops that are solely being harvested for that grain and fiber material. And so when we look at how the definition in the 2014 Farm Bill from industrial hemp changed to the definition of hemp in the 2018 Farm Bill, we really lost some of that distinction between the very different types of production that we're seeing with the different varieties that are out there. Is it grain production? Is it fiber production? Is it cannabinoid production, or some dual or tri-purpose? And so this exemption and this campaign is really about the folks that are growing exclusively for grain and fiber. Now, the way that the framework would work is that there would still be licensing as is outlined under the 2018 Farm Bill. However, farmers would be able to have an option to designate specifically that they would be only growing for grain and fiber. And if they're only growing for grain and fiber, they, of course, could not be selling or the floral material or extracting any resin from that material, but they would no longer be required to go under background checks. Well, they would need to have a visual inspection of their crop, and whether that was with drones or an aircraft, or it could also be in person to verify that that crop production is consistent with that designation. As long as it's consistent, they would have no sampling and no testing, and all of those costs would be eliminated for not only the farmers, but for the regulators as well. Now, if for whatever reason the visual inspection came back and showed inconsistent crop production, then the farmer could verify their production by showing sales receipts, sales contracts, their planting report, what have you. And if it was so egregious, the department could require a harvest inspection. And then we do have in place, there are violations, crop production, and restriction for participation in the program, because unfortunately we have seen folks circumventing our programs and, trying to grow marijuana under a hemp license. At least in Oregon, we specifically seen that. And so given law enforcement concerns, especially if there's no sampling or testing occurring on the crops, there's very strict penalties for opting into this exemption. And so I want to make clear is that if you are a farmer who wants to grow cannabinoids, or you're a farmer who wants to grow a crop and maybe harvest grain and cannabinoids or fiber and cannabinoids, that you are absolutely still allowed to do so. You just stay under the existing framework, and there is nothing restricting that type of production and staying within the existing framework. So this is really just a carve out for those farmers that really want to and know that they will only be growing for grain and fiber. So you can learn more about the hemp exemption campaign at hempexemption.com. We have a fantastic video that Morgan put together that really shows the difference in the cultivation methods, the production practices, the harvesting methods, and how different these types of production actually are, and how you can see it right on the ground and in the field. And we also have some additional information about, why we need this campaign and some of the designations existing currently under federal law, looking at the performance-based sampling model and how this is very similar to that model, just codifying it into statute rather than having it only in rule. And you can also sign up to learn more about the campaign at hempexemption.com. Now, Erica will be sharing a little bit more about where we're at in our advocacy outreach, but we will have an advocacy platform coming soon. Anyone that signs up at the hempexemption.com site will get updates on the campaign as it's progressing. And once we have our bill introduced, we will launch our advocacy platform. And this will give you all opportunities to reach out to your members of Congress to get them and encourage them to support the campaign so that we can really help advance our hemp, grain, and fiber. You can learn more again at hempexemption.com. You can sign up with us. We are looking for campaign patrons to help provide some additional financial support behind the campaign. And you can email us at admin@agriculturalhempsolutions or just sign up right at the hempexemption.com site. So I will turn it over to Erica and she can let you all know where we're at.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, all you ladies, and especially thank you, Mandy, for giving us this opportunity to talk about this important initiative. Strategy, when you talk about legislation or anything political, is ever changing. Nothing ever goes as quickly or as smoothly as we would like, and what seems like a no-brainer to us, legislators always tend to have things that they want to know more about. So over the last many months, we've been diligently educating a bunch of legislators, regulators, and outside agencies. We do have champions, which we're super excited about. And we have actually submitted draft language for the bill to the Senate Legislative Council, which is the agency of the Senate that actually drafts the language. So we are very anxiously awaiting for that language to come back because there are certain people that, they want to see the language of what they're signing on for before they officially put their names on it. But in addition to that, we've been going around and talking to various stakeholders and importantly, some of the other agencies that are going to be essential in getting this passed. Primarily, that is NASDA, the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. The legislators want to know how the states feel about it and how the commissioners and secretaries of departments of ag feel about this. So we were super excited that our, conversations with them have gotten a level of support and actually to the point where we have been invited to present to NEASDA, which is the Northeast division of the Association of State Departments of Agriculture. So we're going to have an opportunity to talk directly to that division of NASDA. And what's really great about this opportunity is that the president of NASDA, the president of the policy committee of NASDA, they and the vice president are all part of NEASDA. So a lot of the really important stakeholders of NEASDA as a whole will be in attendance at this meeting. So this is a really wonderful opportunity that we're grateful for. And of note, the U.S. Hemp Builders Association has also been invited to have a table there. So we're going to be able to represent the building industry, which is, part of the reason why this fiber and grain exemption is so important, because the work that USHBA has been doing in moving ICC codes forward has been really important. And, so it feels like a really great collaborative effort in order to start breaking open some of these supply chains. So back to strategy a little bit, yes, ultimately we anticipate that this is going to be language that gets inserted into the 2023 Farm Bill. But what we're doing is we're aiming for getting this introduced as a standalone piece of legislation as soon as we possibly can. But in recognition of the fact that it's it's an election year and there's primaries happening and, the legislative cycle is short. So while it might not be realistic that we're going to be able to get this passed as a standalone bill, we're certainly going to try. And what the effort of getting the language written, going and getting co-sponsorships for this language is going to make the effort to get it into the Farm Bill all the easier. Because as you may recall, that is how the 2018 Farm Bill that legalized industrial hemp came to be. It was a standalone bill that was then put in to the Farm Bill. So that's kind of where we're at there. Like I said, it's a moving target, and we're extremely hopeful that we're going to get our language back relatively soon and that you'll see some press announcements in the next several weeks to a month. And once the bill is introduced, that's when we're really going to need all of you. We're going to need all hands on deck. We're going to need you to go to hempexemption.com and sign up for the advocacy platform and help us contact these senators to make sure that they know that their constituents want this as well. And as always, you're free to reach out to any of us. To Morgan's point in the beginning, we're trying to be a voice and represent all of you. And we recognize that there may be things that we haven't taken into consideration, although we've done our very best to brainstorm every possible scenario. And I feel we've done a pretty good job. But we want to hear from you. We want to earn your support. And we look forward to hearing from all of you.
Awesome. So I'm really excited about this because of the growth of the fiber and grain market, right? And the differences. And there was a comment made that I'd like to address. And then I'd like to really dive into understanding that there are other bills being presented and other advocacy work being done. What separates this bill from those, right? And this opportunity. But the question I want to talk about is the Delta 9 threshold, right? The 0.3 to 1.0 in the current farm bill. What's being anticipated, and where is this separate and benefits, pros and cons to the threshold?
Well, from my perspective, so, we're still talking about THC. And at the heart of that, like, we're trying to remove that from the conversation relative to grain and fiber. I think that's really important because, like Courtney talked about, is, the DEA already recognizes that the stock material and the seed material isn't worried about the THC content of it. So to me, Delta 9, Delta 8, 0.3, 1%, like, it's not even in the conversation. We've had so many opportunities with regulators, a lot of people that just are ignorant to the industry. And so as soon as we start to bring those conversations in with grain and fiber, it gets really muddy and people get really confused. And unfortunately, it seems to be a slippery slope from there. So to me, I think we just need to remove THC from the conversation. We're talking about seed, we're talking about stock, we're talking about fiber. That THC isn't found in those materials. It's left in the field at harvest. There's concern about compliance, like it's not even a harvestable material. So to Courtney's point, I don't know if people picked up on that, is when you designate on your application, you're saying what material you are harvesting off the field. You can support that with your contracts. You can support that with, seed labels. And ultimately, it's that harvesting material, whether it's gone through a retting process or it's been combined, that floral material is no longer achievable to bring into market. So I don't even want to talk about the THC, right? Because that's when it gets confusing for regulators. I think that the floral industry absolutely has opportunity there, and we don't want to take away from what they're doing. But this exemption is really to try and focus on seed and stock material and separate grain and fiber from floral.
Yeah, and I think it's worth emphasizing that point, that the effort for 1% will not affect what we're doing here with the exemption, because we're actually going to be creating a sub definition of hemp that creates that platform for exemption for fiber and grain. So certainly the raise to 1% on the cannabinoid side is not something that we would oppose, but it's not part of our effort. And we need to be very careful to keep those initiatives separate. But they're not mutually exclusive, in that the 1% raise on cannabinoids is not a threat to us. And what we're doing is not a threat to that effort either.
Yeah, and I'll add, there's a lot of conversations happening on Capitol Hill right now regarding the 1%. There's a few different bills that have been introduced. I saw one of them mentioned in the chat here, the Hemp Advancement Act, Rand Paul's Hemp Act from last year. They're out there. The conversations are happening. I don't think any of the bills that have been introduced really have any, a lot of support yet. There's a number of issues with the drafting of the Hemp Advancement Act currently. And I saw one of the comments in here is asking, is hemp exemption going to replace that? No, these are separate initiatives and they're addressing completely separate issues. The Hemp Advancement Act really is focused on just general farm bill cleanup and more on cannabinoid production, whereas we're focused here specifically on grain and fiber production. But they're not mutually exclusive, and neither initiative will hurt the other, as Erica said. They're more complementary, I would say.
What about some of the other, initiatives? Is there anything else that you would say really separates what you guys are doing from existing or from others? Like, what really?
I think the major difference between some of the other proposals that we've seen is that we don't want certified seed. Not that certified seed is not valuable, but just not for reasons of compliance. So we do not want the exemption to hinge on that. That portion of the industry needs more time to develop. And we don't want to create monopolies at this stage of the game either. So that's the major difference, is that we do not advocate for the exemption being dependent upon certified seed. Not that we don't see the value of certified seed, but it should not be a mandate.
Well, and I think you said it very well, right? What's the industry ready for? And if we come in and we set some of these mandates, and this is something we struggled with our seed trials, and that we really butt up against with our seed trials is, we do not have the number of genetics or stable genetics to say that we can scale an industry to meet the demand and only require certified seeds at this time. Or where I even go, as I'm looking at fiber quality throughout the growth process, is, the quality of fiber with the higher THC, amounts. And so I also see, stifling that it becomes a concern of mine and of manufacturers or processors that are looking for a fiber that we can grow in the US.
And when we look at the role that certified seed plays in other normal crops,
yes,
it's not for legality purposes. It's
right.
for yields. It's for quality. Yes. And that's where we really need the industry to focus on quality and cleanliness and germination rates and superior yields.
Yeah, yields. I think that's a big thing, right? What are we paying our farmers? We are not going to grow a market with 50,000. John Rulak said it yesterday on my interview. He said, we will not build an industry with 50,000 products. We have to have good yields for our farmers from the very beginning to really begin to make a difference and an impact. So
we're fortunate, my company, I&D Hemp, we've contracted, in the last 4 years up to 20,000 acres. And so we've had an opportunity to really see it at scale. So I just kind of want to speak to what you talked about, because it is such a reality. So the farm economics are so key, right? Like, even if we open up the door for regulations and farmers can have access to all these things, at the end of the day, they have to grow something that is economical and competitive. And so the yields is really key. And so I echo Erica's sentiment that certified seed absolutely has a place to play, and the cream will rise to the top, right? So farmers are going to work with breeding programs and genetic companies that bring them high yielding genetics. And THC, unfortunately, has just led the conversation. So back to what I said, when that is no longer on the table, now we let characteristics that are going to make us a competitive commodity market lead the way. So yields, characteristics in the seed, whether we're talking amino acid profile or fatty acid profile, tensile strength, herd content, all of these characteristics that we know are available and can be bred to be superior products, superior performers, they have to come to the forefront. And so I really think that that's important to see that, we have a short-term problem in the certified seed program for the next 3 to 5 years. We can't service the national industry. Maybe we can service pockets and regions, but we can't serve the entire United States. And that's not fair for a program or a policy to go forward that really can't speak to all farmers across the US. And there was a comment that talked about, what are we're potentially putting at risk these food ingredients. If we don't care about the THC content, what about the cannabinoid levels on food, which is absolutely relevant. But you're going to find that manufacturers and processors, they're already held to a standard by their consumers to create certificates of analysis for their outgoing product. And so they are going to continue to use genetics that allow them to meet, specifications on those certificates of analysis. So you may see that certified seed is chosen anyways because they can help service their customers. But what we're just trying to say here is that let the market dictate what you're growing. Let's not let a regulation tell a farmer what he should grow. And it goes back to, if we're not harvesting floral material, if that compound cannot come off the field, then why are we letting it dictate, how we're managing our production?
Can you talk to me about the word harvesting and how that plays a role in fiber and grain production?
Yeah, it's something I wish I could just bring everyone out to Montana and just let them see, because it's almost like every time someone comes out here and they see a field and they see production, it clicks for them. They understand what we're doing here, they're not at risk. So in a grain crop, right, we're harvesting the seed head, and those trichomes that hold the cannabinoids go through the combine and they go out the back end of the harvester, and it's essentially dust at that point. And there is equipment out there that can collect those trichomes. It's very specialized, and at volume, it's challenging to do. And so, like Courtney said, if you want to do a dual crop model or a tri-crop model and you want to harvest those trichomes, that is absolutely acceptable, but you just have to fall under the current program, where you do have to sample and you do have to test and make sure you're in compliance. But most grain producers, right? My company, we're an oilseed company. We've contracted thousands of acres for grain. They're row crop farmers. They want to put in a seed that just fits their existing infrastructure. They use, straight cut combines, and that material goes out the back end with, in the windrow. Similarly for fiber production, we're cutting it, sometimes before it even flowers. And when you lay it down and you go through that critical retting process where you're allowing that bacteria to start eating away at the lignins and pectins so you can separate the bast fiber from that hurd, which is really, really important to understand is those trichomes, or if there was flower material on there, is essentially left in the field to decompose. And so even if you were to see that there's flower out there, by the time it is windrowed, raked over, and then baled, there's nothing left for you to capture. So, you can see a really great example. Montana Department of Agriculture has recognized, and they have an approved USDA program. Not only do they do performance-based sampling, but they also recognize that for fiber genetics, they don't even sample until it's post-retted. So they don't sample during the flower material because that's not when harvest happened. It cuts then, but harvest actually happens when you bale it and you move the product off the field. And so, there's state departments of agriculture that recognize and understand this. And so I think it's just a matter of informing USDA, which they are behind this. We've had conversations with Bill Richmond. They want to be able to manage the crop separately. And so that harvesting technique is pretty critical to understand. Even if there is a risk, we can't, with the current, applications and really the economics behind, cannabinoids and fiber and grain, you're not going to be able to realize any floral material.
Erica, Courtney, do you guys have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, that was a pretty good rundown of everything. I did have a thought, and it just just ran away from me. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Public comment. Did we?
Oh, sorry.
I can address that one. I thought Morgan did a fantastic job clarifying the distinction. So thank you, Morgan. So public comment. So traditional public comments are really only in rulemakings with agencies, which will happen after we pass legislation and USDA goes back to the table to work on our rules. But I think what you're probably talking about is when will the public be engaged to reach out to members of Congress? And that will be available through our advocacy platform once the bill is introduced. And so as Erica mentioned, we drafted our language. We've sent it to Senate Legislative Council. We're just waiting for those drafts back. Once we have our drafts back, we will have a formal release and an introduction of that language. And upon the introduction, then we'll be engaging and reaching out to all of you to help engage and reach out to all of your members of Congress. So we're a little bit of time away, but if you do go to the hempexemption.com website and you sign up for the email sign up, you'll be able to get email updates as we progress, and then we will send you the links so that you can engage with the advocacy platform and reach out to your members of Congress.
I remember what I was going to say now.
All you.
To Morgan's point about Montana and their performance-based testing, while that is an option under the USDA final rules as they are right now, not all states have changed their programs to adopt them, and USDA's program itself has not adopted those as of yet. So what this exemption will do is get us closer to that kind of holy grail where everybody's operating under the same set of rules and regulations, which, I think we were all hopeful that the 2018 Farm Bill would provide, but it just hasn't played out that way. So that's another benefit to this program, is it will level the playing field, at least on the fiber and grain side, where we expect to see the most exponential growth of this industry.
Courtney, Aaron comments, thank you very much for focusing the conversation on grain and fiber. I agree. It's very important to move the conversation towards non-direct major agriculture raw materials like fiber, grain, and proteins. Where does this, or where do you see this playing a role or benefiting the protein side, where it's going into the either animal feed and or human consumption?
Yeah, I'll speak to that really quick. So I think that it's really important to recognize that this is like a really critical first step. So what Erica talked about is like in the language, we're actually creating a sub definition. And so like in an ideal world, we'd like ask for everything. And, people have to reach out to us and say, hey, like you guys need to ask for more. But we also we need to get across the finish line. Like we need to get on base, right? And what we hope that we can add to this, maybe it's, with a separate language or a separate bill, or we're not quite sure how it's going to look. But if we create that definition for grain and fiber, now we can tack on a lot of other stuff like insurance and animal feed opportunities and research programs, like all these things that unfortunately, like when you collectively bring in hemp with floral hemp and industrial hemp, the cannabinoid market just gets a whole lot more attention, and good, bad, or otherwise. And we're not trying to detract from this, but we need to have an opportunity to talk about them separately. So insurance is a big deal, right? Like I've been trying to contract all spring. And one of the biggest things my farmers come back to me on is like, well, the insurance is like total crap, which I get it. Like we're in a drought right here now in Montana. And like, I feel bad for my farmers. And a lot of them are quite frankly, like they're farming for the insurance this year. And so like hemp needs to be able to play in that. Animal feed is another big thing. I'm the executive director of Hemp Feed Coalition and like have had numerous conversations with regulators and their fear of cannabinoids. Well, it goes back to, like the plant physiology, the cannabinoids that are maybe present in those ingredients for grain, are very minuscule. We call it contamination because they're not found in the seed naturally. And so for us to be able to leverage the playing field and say, hey, the ingredients that we're talking about have minuscule amount of cannabinoids. And there's research to support that there is no transference in any of the tissue, in any of the animal byproducts. And so let's evaluate this ingredient as a nutritional supplement. It is a superior protein. It has an amazing amino acid profile. It's very digestible. And let's bring it into the feed market. We have to be able to play in those spaces if we want this industry to grow. So I think that it's critical for us to first get this designation to allow us to talk to people at a whole nother level that doesn't get confusing, that, we don't have to worry about educating people about cannabinoids, which is still very new to most people. And we just talk about it like it's a protein source. It's a plant-based protein, competes with pea, it competes with soy protein, and allow us to grow it in the food and feed market.
Daryl had a couple of questions too, wondering about fiber processing for textiles. I know that there are a couple coming online. I don't know if it's something you guys have a comment to.
I would just say, yeah, there's a lot coming online. Textile is a very technical material. So it's challenging. Our company, we're working with people. We were at Textile Show just a few weeks ago. There's a huge demand and interest. It's really exciting to see that this supply chain is recognizing the value. And there's a consumer outcry, right? They want to see these natural fibers available. It is just a part of that supply chain into textiles is a little immature right now. We need a few more value-added processors to come online. Obviously the conversion from the raw material of hemp straw into a fiber that's of quality that they can, then do a cottonization step and then spin it and make it into a yarn for textiles. There's quite a few steps in between that. I remember one of my first years, someone called me and was like, hey, I have a machine that you can throw a bale of hemp straw and it gets 100 t-shirts an hour. And I was like, that's intriguing. So it's not quite like that, but it's definitely an opportunity. And I know that there's a lot of people investing in it, our company included. So hopefully within the next, 18 months, you're going to hear several names out there trying to get in.
Yeah. And I think what we will see more sooner than traditional clothing type textiles is we're going to see a bunch of non-wovens, replacements for things like disinfectant and baby wipes. Those could be on the shelves as soon as the end of this year, the beginning of next year. So super excited to see that because, a lot of people aren't even aware that those wipes that we all started hoarding when COVID started are actually made of plastic. We don't think of synthetic fibers as being plastic, but they actually are. So I'm super excited to see a big rise in non-woven hemp textiles.
I had John also yesterday made a comment about baby formula. That there's a new baby formula being manufactured here, but exported only due to, regulations. But talk about a healthy, especially right now where, sunflower is the number one ingredient in most baby formula, which is limited by Ukraine and Russia's.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. I'll tell you what, I'm glad I don't have new babies right now. because it makes me very anxious going to the store and not being a mom and seeing no formula on the shelves. So it's, definitely opportunity time. Any other comments that you guys have? How do others really find, how do we find, each of you are involved in different groups, and, we talked about Hemp Feed Coalition. Erica, what's going on over at National Hemp Association, and how do people get involved, and what are you guys doing there, as well as Courtney? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm the executive director of the National Hemp Association. Our website is nationalhempassociation.org. And we've been doing a lot of work in a lot of different areas. My major focus has been on this exemption for quite a while. But in addition to that, we have our SCOHO, Standing Committee of Hemp Organizations, as well as we have our Standing Committee for Social Equity. And there's been a lot of work in both of those committees trying to further stuff. We're also just formed a new Standing Committee for International Hemp Organizations. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at, building supply chains, across the country, influencing regulation and providing good educational content for our members. Our Standing Committee for Social Equity has created an entire kind of platform of educational materials. And right now we're working to partner with HBCUs and other nonprofits that service underrepresented communities in order to provide them these educational resources for free. So at any given time, we have a whole bunch of irons in the fire, but top priority right now is this grain and fiber exemption.
I'll tell you what, I love seeing the collaboration. I think it's key, and it's been awesome watching you guys really link arms. Yeah, Courtney, I know that you're very focused on this exemption and moving the industry forward here. Do you have any other comments or anything else you're working on?
I got a lot of things on the fire. Yeah, no, I want to echo what you just said, Mandy. The collaboration that we've had working with Erica and Morgan and I, and, with you recently, it's been just really heartwarming and just like a breath of fresh air. And we've just, it's been incredible working with everybody, and just, we come to the table, we have different ideas, we push back, we play devil's advocate to one another, and we're like, well, what about this? What about this? And like, even though we're all trying to accomplish the same goal, like, we challenge each other, which has been really fantastic. And I think that's also why we've been so successful as we have been to date, and we've been getting the support from the offices that we're getting, and the way that we've been able to draft the language. And because we have so many different experiences and different backgrounds, and we look at this from different ways, but we all know what the long-term goal is. And, we all really want to see this industry thrive. We want our farmers to thrive. We want not only our existing manufacturers to thrive, but we want to see existing industries in other industries that aren't hemp focused to come in and support this and see, hey, there's another ingredient, there's another raw material out there that we can start incorporating into our products. And so I think this is really just the beginning of really kind of the realization of what I think we've all dreamed of hemp becoming. So I'm really excited to see this carried through. And some of the other things I'm working on, agricultural hemp solutions. I mean, we've been drumming the 1% beat for, almost a decade here. So, we're having conversations with offices about that in regards to changing the cannabinoid level. I saw some comments in here again about the issues with Hemp Advancement Act. I'm with you 100%. I'm talking with offices about drafting a separate bill that would clean up some of those issues on a federal level. Morgan already mentioned, we're still trying to work on the animal feed piece. And then in Oregon, I also run the Oregon Industrial Hemp Farmers Association, and we've been dealing with some of the illegal growth here, some of the issues with the different types of cannabinoid production. And our governor formed a task force that I was appointed to, and we just started our meetings. And so we're really working on collaborating between not only our legislature and agencies, which we've always collaborated with, but really having a lot of different aspects and points of view from law enforcement at the table, and, really kind of bringing all cannabis together, both the marijuana and the hemp industries, and try to find solutions that can really facilitate moving the industry forward from an avenue that can support everyone based on not only supporting industry, but supporting public safety and supporting environmental consciousness.
Let's dive into this question really quick too. Can you share a little bit about who the hemp grower is? Are these row crop types wanting a new crop, average acres? What's their average yield?
Yeah, so I can only speak for grain and fiber growers. I can't speak for cannabinoids. So for your typical grain and fiber grower, this is a row crop, right? We plant it with an air drill, and we're putting in at somewhere between 20 and 60 pounds to the acre, depending if you're growing for fiber and what, or grain, and what seed you're using. Seed side varies drastically. So, how many seed counts you get per pound is very different. They're harvesting it with traditional, agricultural implements and harvesting equipment. And so this looks like your, traditional row crop grower, whether it's corn or soy or wheat or, chickpeas, whatever it is. And you're finding that there are definitely regions that this can be adopted more quickly. Montana is one of them because, first of all, we have access to genetics that are grown in Canada and been bred for this region. It is definitely sensitive to the area and the climate. And then also, what is the on-farm storage capabilities? What sort of access to industry and the market do they have? But I would say for us, our minimum acreage is 40 acres. Really, anything less than that is too arduous to handle because we have to have certificates of analysis and lot tracing all the way back. So we really say, 40 acres is kind of our minimum. I think fiber could potentially be smaller. When you look at the Carolinas or Kentucky, 40 acres is a pretty big farm for those guys. And so I think that you could find something smaller for fiber, but it goes back to the logistics with fiber, right? You're harvesting a bale off the field. And so you have to logistically be situated close enough to a processor that it makes sense economically to ship it. And so as far as yields go, grain is kind of still all over the place. We hope to get a minimum of 500 pounds of the acre. It really starts making economic sense closer to 1,000 pounds per acre. On the fiber side, we're hopeful that we get, 3 tons to the acre. Really, hopefully we push to 4 to 5 tons, especially as genetics continue to develop. And we start to understand, what is this good in rotation with? What is the nutrition package that you need to put on it? All these things that our industry just hasn't had time to understand. So hopefully more extension offices come online and they start really diving into these particular details that are very relevant to the region specific. So.
Absolutely. Brian's got a great question for the speakers. What are the areas of support for this goal that are most solely needed?
Right now, we need funding. We have been working really hard for probably already 7 months. All of us, really self-funding. A lot of the most support's been coming from IND Hemp, and they're our big champions, and they've been doing so many amazing things for this industry. I am so honored and grateful to work with you all. But yeah, we're looking for some financial support. So, we have a patron deck for those that are really wanting to come on and help carry this initiative forward. And then, of course, once we do have our bill introduced, we'll be looking for all of you to reach out to your members of Congress as constituents to get them to sign on as co-sponsors. So if you go to hempexemption.com and you can sign up for the email list, or if you want to reach out to admin at Agricultural Hemp Solutions, we can get you more details about the patron deck and signing on with us.
What is the fundraising goal?
We'd love to bring in $150,000 so that we can carry this initiative through the Farm Bill, that we can sponsor a fly-in day in DC and get some folks out there to really hit home what's happening on the ground and why this is so important for everyone in our industry.
Yeah, that may seem like a big ask for people, but when you break it down, it doesn't take long to add up. It's so important to have those in-person visits, and we're all over the country. So just the logistics of getting us there. And we're spending quite a bit of money on just the materials to educate. I had the opportunity to speak in Indiana last week, and it was really humbling to realize, we're in this every day. So, right, we live and breathe this stuff. It's pretty clear to us. But when you talk to someone who's not necessarily as, engaged with the industry, there's a lot of education that has to happen, and you have to put it in a format that they can digest it quickly. They don't have time or the bandwidth to really dive in and get to know the details. And so there's an emphasis on how do we market this? How do we educate those people we're talking about in a way that's quick? It's, easy, like I said, easy to digest. And at the end of the day, they have something that we can leave with them that they can go back to, and they can share with their constituents. They can share with their staffers, because, we're just a small group. And even if you guys engage, and we're hopeful that you do, we need people to perpetuate the message, and we need them to be able to talk about it and articulate it in a way that we don't make it more confusing. So all that unfortunately just takes money and time, and we're willing to do it. We're willing to put in our resources and make it happen, but every little bit helps.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize what Morgan just said. Eric and I had some conversations with some Senate attorneys, Senate council attorneys who've never seen a plant. And we had to just go over again and again and again the nuances of hemp itself and of the different types of production. And, a lot of us that are in the industry or that are on this webinar today, we live and breathe this. We know these plants. We've seen them. We've walked the fields. So we know these distinctions. And for those on the Hill, this is still a new crop. Some of them have never seen these plants. And so it's really critical that we do have the tools to continue to educate them. And ideally, we can get them out into a field this harvest season.
That's awesome. Awesome. So if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to these ladies. Ladies, where's the best place for people to reach you? Is it the website? Is it individually? Erica, where should somebody reach out to you specific?
Any way is convenient for you to reach out. We will find a way to respond. You can do it through the website. You can reach out to any of us, independently. So through hempexemption.com would be a good way. You can go to nationalhempassociation.org, and we have a contact form, or my email address is just erica@nationalhempassociation.org. Pretty simple to remember, but literally whatever works for you. Like, we're here to listen. We're here to help. So reach out and we will respond.
Yeah, and we welcome your comments. We welcome your thoughts. We welcome your feedback. We want to do this for all of you. We want to do this for the benefit of the industry long term. And so if you have other ideas, we are absolutely open.
Yeah, and I'll just say, obviously, Mandy, you've done a great job. You have a global audience. And so I appreciate all of those viewers that, aren't here in the States. But those of you who are in the States, a lot of people look to the U.S. for leadership. When it comes to regulations and standards, they look to the U.S. for this leadership. And so here's a really good opportunity for us, to open the global market, right? If the U.S. can recognize and we get our politicians behind, grain and fiber has an opportunity to play. There's a global market to participate in and really stand behind it because we have this distinction. Then I hope to see that the rest of, we'll have many countries that follow suit. So I think it's really important to recognize, yes, this is a U.S. initiative, but it has a ripple effect that can absolutely influence, the global hemp industry.
I love it. Okay, well, again, thank you very much to all of our members and our sponsors, Morgan, Prairie Brand Ag, Formation Ag, Westtown Bank, Let's Talk Hemp, and the list goes on. We really appreciate everything that you're doing, and I encourage, please get involved. GHA has not spent time focusing on policy because there are groups like this that are doing an exceptional job. And so I appreciate being able to link arms and give this opportunity to not just our members, but the industry. And so I'm going to put it out there again. If there's anything we can do, don't hesitate to reach out. We really, really appreciate you. Anything else before we close, ladies?
We appreciate you too. Thank you so much for this.
Absolutely. But without that, ladies, I really appreciate you. Any other, t-shirts. I want to encourage you guys to please go support our seed trials and our donations right now. We have an awesome dollar for dollar match that's pretty heavy for the association and for Friends of Hemp for our seed trials and for continued education to farmers to support groups like Morgan and South Bend Hemp and other partners that are involved. And so it's dollar for dollar match. You can go to friendsofhemp.org or globalhempassociation.org and find that info. And then our t-shirts are on sale also in the same spot. I do still need addresses for Erica and Morgan, and I'll get t-shirts sent out for both of you. Other than that, thank you guys, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.